The WNBA and everyone associated with it can't stop disrespecting Caitlin Clark. It's getting ridiculous. They tried to do it with the top 25 list, they did it with the Rookie of the Year race for months, and now that that's become impossible to deny, they're now disrespecting her in the MVP race, a conversation that Caitlin Clark has well and truly played her way into. And by the way, I'm not the only one saying this.
Indiana Fever rookie sensation, Caitlin Clark. It's nothing really to say other than that. She's winning Rookie of the Year. She's a top candidate for league MVP honors.
All of a sudden, Caitlin Clark is starting to push A'ja Wilson for MVP of this league.
But this disrespect right here is a lot more disrespectful than the disrespect Caitlin Clark has received in the past. Because when ESPN made their lists repeatedly disrespecting Caitlin Clark, having her ranked as low as 6th among rookies, and even in the most recent update, still not having her ranked number 1, we understand what ESPN is. It's a sports network who needs rate. They're going to do it because that gives them the attention they need.
Money.
But it's a bit different when the WNBA officially releases an MVP list and the same thing happens. Caitlin Clark is undeniably a top 5 WNBA player right now, with arguably the strongest MVP case of any player besides A'ja Wilson. And yet she doesn't make this list. Way down the bottom of the screen, she's an honourable mention. And I'm telling you right now, if the WNBA can get away with this, what's gonna happen next is one of the biggest robberies. Caitlin Clark is going to be snubbed from first team All-NBA, which would be a criminal disservice to the historically great season that Caitlin Clark has had. And truth be told, she deserves to be higher than a lot of players on this list. So let's go through them one by one and dismiss each player at a time. Starting at number 5, Alyssa Thomas. Now right off the bat, she should be disqualified from consideration simply for the fact that she failed to back up her trash talk. Last season, Alyssa Thomas broke the WNBA record for most assists ever in a single season. That's a great accomplishment. But during March Madness, while Caitlin was producing one of the greatest postseason runs in NCAA history, her teammate tweeted that Caitlin might lead the WNBA in assists next year. Alyssa Thomas, feeling herself, found this very amusing and responded to that tweet saying, "Don't play with me." Funnily enough, another person who found this interaction hilarious was Cheryl Swoops, who replied with laughing emojis. Well, fast forward to the season, and Alyssa Thomas again broke the WNBA record for most assists in a season. She averaged more assists this year than she did last year. The only problem is, the player she was mocking also broke the WNBA single season assist record, but actually averaged more assists per game than Alyssa Thomas has ever in her entire career. But not only does Caitlin average more assists than Thomas, she averages more points too. Thomas is averaging 10.5 points, while Caitlin Clark is pushing almost 20 points per game. They call Thomas the triple-double machine, that she's a Swiss Army knife that can do everything on the floor. But looking at the numbers, she's only a few bad games away from averaging a triple single this season. This is actually kind of similar to the Angel Reese double-double thing, because Alyssa Thomas is considered the triple-double king. She's the all-time leader. This season she has recorded one more triple-double than Caitlin Clark. We have to realize that there's a difference between a triple-double that looks like this and a triple-double that looks like this. In the NBA, when Russell Westbrook won MVP for averaging a triple-double for an entire season, he also led the NBA in scoring, averaging over 30 points per game. Not only is Alyssa Thomas not averaging a triple-double, she is also 37th in the entire WNBA in points per game. Among all starters on the Connecticut Sun, Alyssa Thomas averages the least amount of points. She is 5th in scoring on her team, while there's barely 5 players in the entire WNBA who average more points than Caitlin Clark. On the Sun, there are 6 players scoring in double-digit points. No wonder she averages so many assists. Every player on the court is capable of scoring, and yet she still averages less assists than a rookie Caitlin Clark. You tell me how many assists Clark would average if every player on the Fever averaged 10 or more points per game. Yes, the Sun have a better record than the Fever. Are you seriously trying to say that she is more valuable to the Sun than Caitlin is to the Fever? If not, then she shouldn't be ahead of her in MVP voting. Now the next player on this list at number 4 is Brianna Stewart. Now if we're talking about best players in the world, she'd be higher on this list. Possibly as high as 2nd depending on how much emphasis you want to put on past performance and reputation. But right now this season, Brianna Stewart, who was MVP last season, really shouldn't be in this conversation. she's averaging less points, less rebounds, less assists, and is shooting a worse percentage from the field, free throw line, and a career worst 29% from 3-point range this season. Statistically, when comparing her to Clark, Stewie looks like she edges it if you're just box score watching, as she marginally wins in points per game, but playing different positions, they have different responsibilities. They both average 8.5 assists/rebounds per game. Obviously, assists are harder, which makes Caitlin's more impressive. Clark also averages more rebounds than Stewie averages assists. And in terms of efficiency, Clark shoots a higher percentage from 3-point range, the foul line, and even on 2-pointers despite being a guard. Truth be told, Brianna Stewart is having a solid season, but not a great season by her standards. And the main reason she is as high as she is on this list is because she plays for the New York Liberty, who have the best record in the WNBA this season. But the fact that she was MVP last year, her team is now the best team in the league, and she isn't going to be MVP this year goes to show that individually she hasn't been as good as she was last season. And the fact that there is another player on her team ranked higher than her on this list, in my opinion, disqualifies her from any consideration. Because how can I take you serious as an MVP candidate when you're not even the MVP of your own team? The WNBA ranked Sabrina Ionescu as number 3 on this list. She's being credited as the main reason the Liberty are the best team in the WNBA. That's all it is, because when you compare Clark and Sabrina statistically, it's not close. Clark averages 19.2 points, Sabrina averages 19.1. Clark averages 8.4 assists, Sabrina averages 6.1. Clark averages 5.8 rebounds, Sabrina averages 4.6. Clark averages 1.3 steals, Sabrina averages 1 steal. Clark shoots 42% from the field, Sabrina shoots 40%. Clark shoots 35% from 3-point range, Sabrina shoots 33%. Clark shoots 55% on 2-pointers, Sabrina shoots 48% on 2-pointers. Clark shoots 90.7% at the foul line, Sabrina shoots 90.2% at the foul line. Every single individual statistical category, Caitlin Clark beats Sabrina Ionescu. But because the Liberty are better than the Fever, Sabrina's MVP? Well, that's probably got something to do with supporting cast. Sabrina is playing with not only last year's MVP, who's a top 5 player this season, but also another MVP from a few seasons ago in Jonquel Jones, who ESPN ranked as the 5th best player in the WNBA at mid-season. The Liberty have 3 top 10 players. So who's really the Liberty's MVP? In 2021 it was Jones, last year it was Brianna, and now it's Sabrina. They need to make their mind up who New York's best player is. They seem to change it every year. And that's not to mention the fact that the Liberty also have one of the best guard defenders and another all-star in Lainey Hamilton. They also have Courtney Vandersloot, who has led the WNBA in assists 7 times. She's the only player in WNBA history to ever average double-digit assists for a season. She has been an all-star 5 times, and takes some of the playmaking responsibility away from Sabrina. Clark doesn't have that privilege playing alongside one of the greatest passers ever, as well as another 2 MVPs. Clark has to not only score, but she also has to create for others, and she's doing so more so than Sabrina despite her unfavourable circumstances. Seriously, how many more assists would Caitlin Clark average playing alongside 2 MVPs? How many more points would she average with 2 MVPs taking the defense's attention away from her? And the bottom line to me is, how can you be 3rd in MVP voting when some people would argue you're the 3rd best player on your team? The fact that on the WNBA's official list, when citing their reasoning for ranking each player, the majority of Sabrina's pitch was referencing a singular moment from a singular game, that highlights that you really don't have much of a case at all. Yes, Sabrina hit a big shot in a big game, but MVP stands for most valuable player, not the most valuable play from 2 months ago. And there's a ton of hypocrisy on this list, because if the criteria seems to favour team success so much, and Sabrina is given the nod over Caitlin Clark despite having worse stats because of her team's record, then why is A'ja Wilson given the nod over Napheesa Collier, who also has worse stats but a better team record? Before we get started on that controversial take that the casuals aren't ready for, I just want to make clear from this point forward, we have a debate. I'm not delusional nor biased. The top 3 for MVP is Caitlin Clark, Napheesa Collier and A'ja Wilson. And if you want to make a case for any of these 3 players being the most valuable player, I'm listening. We're focusing so much on Caitlin Clark because she's the one that's being disrespected, and saying that Alyssa Thomas, Brianna Stewart or Sabrina Ionescu are having a better season than her individually or are more valuable to their teams than Caitlin Clark is, that's a conversation I'm not going to entertain any further, because Clark is at worst a top 3 candidate in what is a closer MVP race than anybody wants to admit. And Caitlin Clark isn't the only one whose MVP case is being slept on, because Napheesa Collier deserves some recognition. The Minnesota Lynx have the best record in their conference, the second best record in the entire WNBA, and historically speaking, the WNBA MVP award has gone to a player on a number 1 seed every single year since 2008. Newsflash, the Aces aren't a number 1 seed, and yet A'ja Wilson is going to win the MVP unanimously, despite the fact that when Fee and A'ja faced off against each other, not only did Collier outplay A'ja and win the game, she had one of the greatest performances in WNBA history, becoming the first player to ever drop at least 25 points, 15 rebounds and 5 assists in a game while shooting above 70% from the field. But we're told the MVP debate isn't a debate worth having, when almost any other year Collier would be MVP of the WNBA with the season she's had. She's averaging 20.2 points per game and 9.8 rebounds. That's basically a double-double. She's 0.2 boards off of averaging 1, and a 0.2 difference in rebounds should not be the difference between us taking her more seriously as an MVP candidate. She has the best defensive rating in the entire WNBA. She's 8th in blocks with 1.3 per game, and 3rd in steals with 1.9 per game. And unlike the other great WNBA teams, the Minnesota Lynx are not a super team. They don't have multiple MVPs, Olympians and All-Stars like the Liberty and Aces. Last season the Lynx were below 500. They were drafting 6th overall, and coming into the season were ranked the 9th best team. To go from that to the number 1 seed in the West with a top 2 record in the W is not something we should just brush to the side. And as the season goes on, she continues to build on her already compelling case. Since the All-Star break, the Lynx have been the best team in the WNBA, but because we've just written off the MVP award already, nobody is acknowledging that Napheesa Collier has made up some serious ground. Now when it comes to comparing her to Caitlin Clark, it's very difficult because they play different positions and the impact they have both had in transforming their teams is somewhat comparable. However, the circumstances are not entirely comparable, as the Lynx were significantly better than the Fever last season and have been over the last decade. And while Minnesota have exceeded expectations, I think a big part of that is because they were underestimated coming into the season. Like her or not, Cheryl Reeve is one of the best WNBA coaches. She's the head coach of Team USA for a reason. Kayla McBride is considered a top 15 player. Napheesa Collier is considered top 3. That's just not comparable to the Indiana Fever. So in terms of exceeding expectations and elevating their teams, although the Lynx have a better record, I think it's still very close. Statistically, it's close too. Fee edges Clark in points per game 20.4 to 19.2. I think Clark's assist numbers are more impressive than Fee's rebounds, considering the fact that Clark's breaking assist records and Fee isn't breaking rebounding records. Clark is also averaging more rebounds per game than Fee is averaging assists. That's also got to count for something. And obviously when looking at the defensive stats, Collier clears there. Efficiency wise, Clark shoots a higher percentage on 2-pointers despite being a guard. She shoots a better percentage from 3-point range, from free throws, and her true shooting percentage is higher also. In my opinion, both these players have extremely strong MVP cases. They both deserve to be in the conversation, and I would completely understand picking either way. Unfortunately, the conversation doesn't even get to that point because we're in a space where you're not allowed to have an opinion on the MVP race other than giving it to A'ja Wilson unanimously, because for some reason nobody wants to debate or challenge this predetermined notion. And because of that, A'ja Wilson is definitely going to win MVP. She's number 1 on this list, she's number 1 on every list. And her case is very straightforward. She's putting up the best stats in WNBA history and is peaking at the highest level we've ever seen a WNBA player reach statistically. But A'ja Wilson's MVP case is not flawless, and to award her this MVP, we'd have to be willing to ignore the fact that despite her individual excellence, the Aces are the 4th seed, despite having 4 Olympians on their team and being back-to-back champions. We talked about Clark and Collier elevating their teams and exceeding expectations. The Aces were projected to be the number 1 seed coming into the season, and they're not close to that. Now, if Asia breaking the single season scoring record while also leading the league in blocks and being top 2 in rebounds is enough for her to be an exception to the consistent voting criteria for WNBA MVP over the last 20 years, where you have to be a 1 seed, then fair enough. If anyone deserves it, it's her. What I would say though is I think people need to understand there is a difference between being the best player in the world and being MVP of the league. For example, LeBron James was the NBA's best player for nearly 2 decades and he only won 4 MVPs. Now, comparing Asia's season to Caitlyn's is something you're gonna have to wait for, because the people aren't ready for that conversation and will continue to gaslight and undermine Caitlin Clark's historic season, whether it's in Rookie of the Year or MVP races. They are not going to give her the credit she deserves. That's why we have to right here on YouTube, and I am going to change the narrative with my upcoming video titled I Bet I Can Convince You Caitlin Clark is WNBA MVP, and in that video I will be revealing new stats and facts that prove Caitlin Clark is the WNBA's most valuable player right now. You do not want to miss that video. I will not disappoint. It is going to break the internet, so subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to watch that. It will come out after the Fever Aces games that we will be covering and breaking down right here on the channel. So if you've made it up to this point and enjoyed, you'll enjoy this video right here where we expose ESPN and their hypocrisy regarding Caitlin Clark. So click the middle of your screen to watch that, and on that note, it's DKM signing out until next time, and peace.